I know, man. I bet you clicked on this video thinking there's just no possible way this guy is sane, thinking Age of Calamity is going to influence how Breath of the Wild 2 will turn out. Well, this wasn't clickbait. Despite what a lot of the Zelda community believes, I enjoyed every single second of Age of Calamity, and it wasn't nearly as bad as some say it is. In this video, I'd like to have a conversation with you about why Age of Calamity will make Breath of the Wild 2 a much better game. So let's go. Hey, what's up? It's Derek with Zelda Theory, helping you forget about the stresses of daily life by talking about the best video game series of all time, The Legend of Zelda. This channel will consist heavily of Zelda guides, walkthroughs, top 5s, anything related to Zelda on this channel. So if you're new here and you find value at all, consider subscribing and turning on all notifications. Let's dive into the content. I know and I understand completely that Age of Calamity is in a different genre as far as gameplay goes, but I wholeheartedly believe that Breath of the Wild 2 will be better because of what Age of Calamity accomplished. Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity is the latest addition to the Legend of Zelda franchise, and one that I thoroughly have been enjoying as a Zelda fan. Although the game is quite different than most entries in the series, it adds huge amounts of value in terms of drastically mixing up the gameplay from what you typically see in a Zelda game, as well as filling in major plot points of the story. I think the game does this exceedingly well. Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity is a spin-off from the mainline franchise, but it is still connected via characters and the lore. Developer Koei Tecmo's take on the hack-and-slash title in the long-running series may not be as impressive as the best Legend of Zelda games, but Nintendo can still learn from Age of Calamity, and The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild 2 will be better because of it. Breath of the Wild 2 is a highly anticipated video game. I mean, it's all the hype, man. Despite some of its flaws, Breath of the Wild was just so successful and beloved. You and I can barely wait for what Nintendo has in store, but there is some room for improvement with Breath of the Wild and its sequel. A few smart changes would help the game improve, and Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity has, in my opinion, set the table for success in Breath of the Wild 2. The original Breath of the Wild has stayed a top 10 Switch game in terms of sales since it launched, providing that there is a continual appetite from fans to play the game. I know a lot of you, including me, are still to this day playing Breath of the Wild and finding new Easter eggs every single time we sit down to play a session or two. Zelda games often sell well overall, but Breath of the Wild took the game to exceedingly new heights. There hasn't been a Zelda game that accomplished what Breath of the Wild did. One example of this being the open world exploration, as the Zelda series is mostly known for how linear most of the games in the series are. This new addition was 100% welcomed for me as a Zelda fan. Although there were a lot of issues with it, don't get me wrong, which I've talked about before here on this channel, Breath of the Wild 2 will obviously take a lot from the original, but it can and should also be a better game thanks to Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, specifically referring to the game mechanics, the story that Age of Calamity set in place, and the pressure that it has taken off of Breath of the Wild 2. Now, while a title like The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is considered a masterpiece, the Hyrule Warriors games are not quite on that level critically. Based on comments I have seen on the channel from some of you, a lot of you just don't like the hack and slash gameplay that Hyrule Warriors gives, and I totally understand that. Age of Calamity did receive relatively positive reviews from other Zelda tubers, as well as the top gaming companies. And no, not IGN, man. I will never understand why IGN does not like the Zelda series. They're always hating on it, and I just don't like them. But that's besides the point. Age of Calamity did an amazing job providing you with a fun twist in gameplay to the typical Zelda experience, and right inside the world of Breath of the Wild, no less. This was something that was just amazing to me, man. Being able to play through all of the areas that were in Breath of the Wild that were just so barren and graveyard-like, and then going through them in Age of Calamity was an amazing experience to me. To me, it just gave the importance of Breath of the Wild a much bigger sense of purpose in the long run, and it just put way more emphasis on the lore of the game. In a lot of ways, Age of Calamity is proof that the Zelda franchise should expand and try new things. Games like Cadence of Hyrule and Link's Crossbow Training are far and few between. While the Mario series has seen countless spin-offs, Zelda is something that Nintendo usually holds a little closer to its heart. But Breath of the Wild also brought so much new to the franchise. It was a leap of faith from the open world aspect we talked about earlier to only having 4 quote-unquote dungeons. That's a whole other topic. What Age of Calamity does show amazingly well, in my opinion, is that Nintendo should allow the Zelda series to continue to evolve and grow. Experimenting with the franchise should be encouraged as long as the core fundamentals of the game remain the same. Does that make sense? Now, I am not saying in any way that Breath of the Wild 2 should be a hack and slash beat 'em up game by any means. Please don't misunderstand this. But it could learn a lot from both specifics of Age of Calamity and from a philosophical level. Specifically speaking, Age of Calamity shows that the weapon breaking system from Breath of the Wild can and should be tweaked. This is one of the negative things about Breath of the Wild that I didn't really care for. I know a lot of you in this community agree with me on that. The world can be explored without slippery mountains, dude. And perhaps even allowing other characters to be playable like Zelda would be a fun change of pace. If Breath of the Wild 2 is as massive as the original, or bigger from what I've been researching, having more than just a Link to play as would be a nice treat to the sequel. Now, even if a one-to-one idea from Age of Calamity isn't used, Nintendo should know that the Breath of the Wild sequel should explore new ideas. Simply giving you and I the exact same game with a new story, it's just not going to cut it. What do you think about this? Let me know in the comments below. Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity takes place 100 years before The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, which was 2017's Game of the Year at the Game Awards of that year. We all know that, yada yada yada. Breath of the Wild literally revolutionized the series in so many ways. In terms of story, Breath of the Wild opened up new possibilities in the franchise, including moving the games to a more mechanical future with the Guardians and the Beast and their powers. With that being said, the game also presented a lot of questions. Questions like, how did Hyrule get so destroyed and lifeless? Why was Link sleeping for so many years? Where did the Guardians come from? Where is Ganon? While Breath of the Wild answered some of these questions, there was still a lot of mystery, and Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity filled in some of those gaps. With Age of Calamity being a prequel, the quote-unquote how did we get here type questions that we had have now been answered. Well, kind of. That being said, there's many questions that Age of Calamity created, but we'll get into that in another video, as that's just a whole other topic that I would like to talk with you guys about. What this then means for Breath of the Wild 2 is that it doesn't have to worry about answering specifics about the war, the champions, and more. They can focus on more important things in the sequel. The Breath of the Wild director personally pitched the idea of Age of Calamity, and then Nintendo worked with Koei Tecmo on the project. The story has the blessings of the whole team, meaning now that Breath of the Wild 2 can simply work around the foundation that was built with both the original Breath of the Wild and Age of Calamity. Now, most rumors place Breath of the Wild 2 as a 2021 release, springtime, sort of in there. Between the original and the sequel, that would equal a 4-year wait. With series like Half-Life, Doom, and Kingdom Hearts either seemingly vanishing from existence or having huge hiatuses between entries, if you think about it, 4 years isn't that long of a wait, especially if we keep getting remakes to hold us over until Breath of the Wild 2 actually releases. Here's to hoping for a Skyward Sword remake. Listen and grant my wish, Nintendo. However, with how great the original Breath of the Wild was, the anticipation leading up to its sequel is immense and in some ways uncontrollable. I get it, man. I'm here with you on that. In some ways, thankfully, Age of Calamity has taken away some of the pressure. I think we all can agree here that Age of Calamity has helped a lot in the pressure of not having Breath of the Wild 2 for the foreseeable future. I don't know, man. I guess I just think there's something to be said about not wanting to be the game that comes directly after a masterpiece, because it seems impossible to meet those expectations of the fans. The Breath of the Wild sequel now is able to follow up Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, and while Age of Calamity has sold very well and it's enjoyed, it is not considered in the same, quote, all-time classic, end quote, realm as Breath of the Wild, which is somewhere that the sequel likely wants to be as well. I truly think 100% without a shadow of doubt that the sequel is going to succeed, especially if the game turns out to be as dark as what I have been told. So hey man, if you enjoyed this video and you found some value here today, be sure to subscribe, turn on all notifications, and be sure to check out the other Zelda content on the channel, YouTube's recommended video for you specifically, as well as another video that I think you're gonna dig a lot, will be clickable on the screen now, so continue to be the light, and remember, it's dangerous to go alone, man. Let's head on over to some more Zelda content.